Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
In collaboration with Boise State Public Radio, the Community Library presents a new podcast, Sheep Stories. I'm host Vance Cunningham. Join me as we listen through the archives of the Trailing of the Sheep Festival to learn about the Scottish, Basque, and Peruvian immigrants foundational to the sheep herding industry over the past century. Hear their stories of traveling to Idaho and learning the language of the sheep. Find Sheep Stories wherever you get your podcasts and at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Together, they've written more than 90 books and sold millions of copies around the world. They write humor, suspense, and young adult novels, and they're both members of the Rock Bottom Remainders, which is a rock band made up of published authors, and it includes Amy Tan, Matt Groening, and Stephen King, just to name a few of its members. Dave Barry rose to fame with his nationally syndicated humor column and has written more than 40 books. Not to be outdone, Ridley Pearson has written more than 50 books, including the best-selling Kingdom Keeper series set in Disney World and other Disney parks. And we got the chance this year to sit down with both of these incredible authors to talk about their latest books, and we wanted to share those conversations with you. So let's start with Pulitzer Prize-winning author Dave Barry as we talk about his new book, Class Clown. You may know Dave Barry as the 1988 Pulitzer Prize winner for commentary or for his nationally syndicated humor column from the Miami Herald that ran from 1983 until 2005. Maybe you even know him from the CBS sitcom Dave's World. This was actually based on his humor writings. Well, Dave Barry is back. And he is writing a brand new book. It's actually a memoir. It's titled Class Clown, The Memoirs of a Professional Wise-Ass. Sounds like my youngest child. Anyway, we are lucky enough to have Dave joining us today to talk more. Dave, really nice to have you on the program.
Gemma, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So how did you decide I'm going to sit down and write a memoir? Because as I mentioned, you're a humor columnist, but you've not necessarily sat down and written an entire book about your life.
No, I was reluctant. Basically, editor and my agent kind of talked me into it. Because you're right. My whole career has been making people laugh, and you're sort of, when you're doing that, you're using humor sort of as a front, and you present what you hope is amusing, but you're kind of behind it, safely hidden from the readers. They don't know, they see what you're doing kind of like a magic act, but they don't necessarily see how you're doing it. So this is more like, here I am. This is where I came from.
I think it's very funny. And you start the book talking about really where your humor and your personality came from, and you credit your parents. And you talk about your childhood and really like how kind of lovely and idyllic it was. But at the same time, you really talk about the humanity of your parents, right? Which I think is something that as we all become adults, we kind of start seeing that our parents are human before they're our parents. So talk to us about that and really opening up about your parents.
Yeah, I had to make a decision about that because it would be easy. I could have just written a book where I talked about, it was crazy. I grew up in the 50s, Davy Crockett, hiding under the desks to avoid nuclear war, all the stuff that, there was a lot of funny things that are, we boomers can be easily entertained by. But I in the end decided to be kind of more honest about my own family. My parents were wonderful people, and they are the reason that I ended up having this wonderful career. They were both very funny people, especially my mom, who had a really dark, edgy, startlingly dark and edgy sense of humor, especially for what was back then called a housewife. She was a mom raising four kids in the 50s. So both my parents were wonderful. Both were funny. I had a great childhood. Both my parents had real issues, though. And it's going to sound like this is some horrible tragedy. So I want to stress ahead of time, again, I had a pretty great childhood. But as you say, you discover things or things happen. My dad was an alcoholic. He wasn't one of those beat your kids, come home throwing stuff guns. He kind
Hmm.
of quietly descended into alcoholism in his late 40s, 50s. He recovered from it and spent the rest of his life. He was always involved in social service, spent the rest of his life helping other people with that same issue. So he recovered. He was great, but it was a hard time for our family, especially for my mom. My mom dealt with depression all her life. And again, it wasn't like she made that our problem. We knew that there were times when she was really sad and just didn't want to talk and everything, but she didn't inflict it on us. And when she wasn't in those moods, she was hilarious and a great mom. But ultimately, when my dad died, she spiraled into depression, had a rough time with it, and ultimately took her own life. And I wrote about that in the book. So you could say, I mean, I could have written it like I had a tragic childhood. My dad was an
Hmm.
alcoholic. My mom committed suicide, but it wasn't like that. I had a great childhood. I had a wonderful childhood, and I got tremendous gifts from both my parents. But they struggled as people do, and I just felt like I needed to talk about that in the book because it was part of where I came from.
What really resonated with me when you wrote about your mom and you talk about how funny she was and that dark sense of humor, right? And you say like you're going to go play in a pond. And she goes, "Don't drown, kids."
Yeah, don't
And I was
drown,
like,
kids. She was this
yeah,
June Cleaver voice, and we got the joke. She was making a joke
right,
about something that most moms would not joke about. And she would
yeah,
joke
but
about anything. So that was
and then you say, "But funny doesn't mean happy." And I was like, "Oh gosh, I think a lot of people can can resonate with that, and also probably bring to mind someone in their life that fits that
yeah,
description."
yeah. To the end, my mom was always funny. I mean, she was never not funny. She could see the humor in everything. But yeah, a lot of the times that didn't translate to my mom was happy. That was just how she processed the world.
One of the things that you write about too is you take us through your time in school from elementary school through high school, college, and you said about elementary school, you're like, elementary school was great. I mean, outside of fearing for nuclear war and polio, and I mean, again, I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, take those out of it. I mean, school was pretty great. Well,
Yeah, but I think there's a lesson there because I think whatever era you're in, people tend to think, oh God, this is the worst it's ever been. The world
yeah,
isn't going,
yeah.
it's going to hell. We're all going to die. Global climate change, whatever. There's always something. But I think about it, like in the 50s, it wasn't like that some people were saying vaguely, oh, there might be a nuclear war. The adults in our lives were telling us to learn to hide under the desk in case there was a nuclear war. It was a serious thing. And that was part of our environment. And because we were kids, we were like, okay, well, now we're getting under the desk to guard against nuclear war, and then we'll go out and play. And polio was like a horrible, horrible thing, a
Yeah.
scary thing, a terrifying thing. I don't know how parents handle that. And I guess the point is there are always things like that happening. And yet life goes on, the world goes on.
And I think too, when you talk about the fact that you were voted class clown in high school, I mean, was this a surprise to you when you got this award?
I earned that award. I didn't really have a lot of other, winning qualities. I was not a good athlete. I was not, I was a pretty good student, but, I wasn't like a leader in any respect. And
Yeah.
my skill was I could make my classmates laugh. I was always good at that. And in fact, I got told more than once by teachers because I was something of a wise ass. Well, that's funny, but you can't joke your way through life, which actually turns out to be
I mean,
untrue. You can.
well, I love that because I have a kiddo similar to that. In fact, they do a student of the month, and one of them is humor. And for the last 2 years, this child has won it for his grade. And in fact, when he
Excellent. You're
first
you're
found,
you're
right,
doomed, Mom.
I know. So when they changed these student of the month things, and one of them was humor, when he found this out, he comes home and he looks at me very seriously and he says, "If I don't win this, this whole thing is rigged." And I'm like, you're not wrong. And but I mean, it's so interesting. I think these kids that really have this sense of humor that goes beyond just being a funny kid. And this is what I found in your book. Like, you're funny, but I get the impression that even as a kid, as a teen, you were thinking about these jokes. Like, you knew you were funny, but you could take it to another level. And is that something that you've just were inherently always had, and going back to your mom and having the sense of humor that she had? Because my son, his humor is older than he is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, again, God bless you. I
Oh,
hope it
thank
works out
you.
okay.
I need
But
every prayer I can get with this child.
but I think you're right. There's a difference between just being funny. A lot of people are funny, and then being sort of obsessive about humor, which was what I was always, and I mean, it's still true of me. It's my career, but even when I was much younger, it was much more important to me to be funny than anything else. It was much more important to me to be able to see how a way to make a situation into a joke than it was to worry about the actual situation most of the time. Like I took humor more seriously than most people, and
Yeah.
still do. Sounds like your son does as well. And as I say, you're doomed.
I am, and I realize this. Before I let you go, what do you hope people take away from this book? Because like I told you, I found it to be so funny, but also just full of levity, which granted I think is partly kind of my sense of humor. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope people, I hope it's funny, like you say. That's what I do. That's the main thing I do. I hope it's entertaining, but I also hope it's like interesting. It was a scary thing to delve into my life as if as if I were some kind of public figure, which I guess in a way I am. Um, but I hope it's interesting, and maybe even, this is going to sound awful, but maybe even a little bit inspirational. Like, if you want to do something different with your life, you want to try something creative. Um, Maybe it'll remind you there's lots of ways to get there, but you can in the end get there if you have the talent and if things work out for you.
That was Pulitzer Prize winning author Dave Barry talking about his new book, Class Clown. Our next guest is no stranger to thrilling adventures and captivating stories. Ridley Pearson is a New York Times best-selling author known for his heart-pounding mysteries and his imaginative tales that have enchanted readers of all ages. And today he is joining us to talk about his exciting new chapter book series, Magical Map. Now, this is a journey full of wonder and mystery and, of course, a little bit of magic. And it is perfect for young readers and for families alike. Ridley, we just adore having you on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you, Gemma. It's such a pleasure and such an honor. You know how much I love Boise Public Radio, and we have to support Boise Public Radio.
Yes, we do. Thank you for that. Okay, let's talk about this new book series, Ridley. Tell us a little bit about the Magical Map and what it's about.
Yeah, well, back in 2018, I was speaking with my agent. Disney wanted some more material from me, and I didn't want to repeat myself. And we thought, one of the great joys of writing for young readers is getting them reading. That's what Peter and the Starcatchers and the Kingdom Keepers series has proven to do. And I get these wonderful emails from parents saying, little Johnny wasn't much of a reader, and I started reading the Kingdom Keepers to him at bedtime, and then he grabbed the book away from me, and now we can't get him out of the library. And, you hear those kind of stories. So we sort of decided to pitch Disney the idea of writing a short, highly illustrated book for grades, I don't know, 2 through 5, something like that, hoping that the people who love the Kingdom Keepers would go out and get them too, because they're just a fun, fast read. And we'd make them high adventure. And like my other books, I do a ton of research inside the Disney parks. And so each one of these books takes place in a single attraction with these 2 young kids. Now, are you ready for their name?
Yes.
The young woman in this is named Gemma,
Stop it.
and her brother is Torin. And where do you
Okay.
think I got the name Gemma, Gemma? Oh,
Well,
I think I just
I'm
gave it away.
I'm hoping you got it from me. So,
I got it from you. So
so tell.
they're both about 10 years old, 11 years old. So the young girl in it is Gemma and her brother Torin. And then their mom is a character who's never named. She's just called Mom with a capital M. My kids call me the commander. So she's kind of the commander.
Okay, I love that. So let's talk about the book itself because I read a little bit about Gemma, and I have to say the one thing that I kind of like about her because it reminded me when I was a kid is she's kind of got this imagination that is it fair to say kind of gets her in a little bit of maybe mischief or trouble, Ridley?
Constantly. Yes. She is sort of Curious George in this whole thing. To go back a generation, no one will know what that is. Look it up. But Gemma is really bright and really curious. And the first book, which is Pirates of the Caribbean, starts out with they're packing up their legacy bookstore because they've got to move because their mother's gotten a position at Disney, and it's sort of breaking the hearts of both Gemma and Torin. And this guy in sort of retro clothing, tweeds. This is Florida. He's wearing tweeds. It's just kind of odd.
Oh,
He's an older gent, and he enters the store, and Gemma goes off to see if she can help him, and she catches him putting a book back on the shelf, not taking one off. And then he kind of turns a corner and's gone. And she goes back and finds this inappropriate book, just inappropriate in it's a journal. It's a leather journal sitting among all the bound books. And it's a pathway eventually to some really curious, crazy hijinks that she and Torin get into inside the parks.
so it's an actual. So it's this. I mean, the book, the series, Magical Map. I mean, she finds this map, right? And it kind of does
It
it
does.
take them
Taped
literally
into the
like?
back of this journal. So the journal is a lot of sketched pages, mostly in pencil, with tons of notes in and around it. And it looks like very early days of the plans for all of Disney World,
Oh,
specifically the Magic Kingdom. But many of the rides that are now there aren't even on this map.
oh
And
my
and she
goodness.
reads through it, and the stories are kind of engrossing. It's you can tell the person whoever did this was looking for a story within each attraction. And then at the back of the journal, old yellow, crinkly, cracking tape is holding in this hand-drawn map. And there's a little backwards code that she decodes, and it turns out that little magical map is, in fact, a magical map that can get her back into the parks when no one's around.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, speaking of that, you get to do that. So,
I do.
what is
Call me
that like,
Torin.
Ridley? Oh, yeah, yeah, you're Torin, exactly. But
You're Gemma, I'm
what's that?
Torin.
Okay, perfect. Let's go. What
Yeah.
is that like to be able to truly go behind the scenes of the park like
Yeah, so
that?
they
And
they let
then,
me in. They let me in after all the people have left, which took a long time to get permission to do. And I'm
mhm.
toured around by an Imagineer, and these are the 4,000 or so people that engineer, create, and build all the attractions. Fascinating, brilliant people. And I get one of those on any visit as my personal guide. And we go in at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning when no one's around. And I get to walk the rides on the emergency routes under really
Oh my
weird lighting.
gosh.
It's creepy, it's cold, it's otherworldly because the park itself is dark. There's nobody around. It's just a whole different experience. And I take furious notes. And then they bring in a team, a set of crew members, cast members, and they start up the rides for me. And I ride them 5, 6 times, taking more notes. And then I go home and, like Gemma, I turn my imagination loose.
Wow. And
But it's
so this
so interesting in their after hours. Oh my gosh.
it has to be. I mean, it has got to be just incredible. I mean, first off, just to be there without crowds. Let's start there.
Right,
But
exactly. And no
then,
music and no special lights. It's just
right.
it's a city of 80,000 people, and they're all gone. And it's
Oh my
so
goodness.
different. It's wonderful and a little eerie, but very fun.
And I would think, Ridley, with this book series in particular, because they're literally like going into the rides and all of that, you really needed to have that experience, right? So that you could put
Yeah.
words to paper and build this story.
Yes, it's so even I write thrillers and mysteries for adults and these adventure books for young readers. All of the adventure books are published by Disney, and from the very beginning of our relationship, I explained that I'm just sort of a hands-on research guy, and I really need to see what it is because I try to describe it almost like a movie when you're reading. And
Hmm.
as I said, they were very reluctant. No one had ever done this as a fiction writer, but they eventually let me do it. And it does. It allows me to show you what I saw, and it makes it so much easier to write because I get in there and honestly, I get scared and a little creeped out, and I get to write all that into the books. So a little less so in Magical Map because it's a younger reader series, but
Hmm.
certainly in the Kingdom Keepers. In Magical Map, Torin and Gemma get in there, and there's always some kind of big problem with the ride. And it's going to keep the ride closed for a long time. And their mother is head of maintenance on the attractions. So
Oh,
they're really trying to help out their mom, but she doesn't know they can sneak in with this map. And they go in there and they end up talking to Disney characters and trying to work things out. And it gets
wow.
very magical and fun.
Can we talk a little bit about the fact that you decided to really go to a bit of a younger audience? We know that
Yeah.
these books are for, second to fifth grade. And you and I have talked about this before, but really, I think the magic in reading, and this is something where, I mean, I have two boys, and man, it is tough to get them to sit and read. But every time I have handed them one of your books as they've been growing up, they've read it. And it's just, I
That's
think
got
it's
to be
just
fiction,
so,
Gemma. Now you're writing the fiction.
I am not Ridley. I am not. It is true. And but truly, I think that, there's something about capturing kids when they're young, like second grade.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
talking like 7 years old, that they
Right.
can start reading. How important it was that to you to do a new series that focused on a bit of a younger audience?
Yeah, well, my mission is to keep kids reading. I mean, that's why the Kingdom Keepers is there, why Peter and the Starcatchers with Dave Barry is there, and now this series. Um, there's just too much screen time, Gemma. It's
Hmm.
making people dumber, and when you get young people reading early and excited about reading and laughing and telling their mom to get out of the room so they can read more, that leads to a life of reading. And the
Yeah.
more we read, the smarter we get. It doesn't even have to be some historical personal thing. It's just that the more words you read, the better vocabulary you get. The better vocabulary you have, people think you're smarter maybe than you are. But it gets you better jobs. It gets you relationships that stick. It's just so important, and just for the sheer joy of having another kind of entertainment than looking at a little screen.
Hmm. So the first book in the Magical Map, Pirates of the Caribbean, it's out right now.
Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean and Jungle Cruise came out on the same day, and they're paperback books. They're inexpensive. They're very short. They're 10,000 words with a lot of illustrations. And I just got an email yesterday that made me jump around the room, but I got an email from a fourth grade teacher who said, "I've loved your books, and I just read both of the books in a single sitting,
Oh,
and they are extraordinary, and I'm going to introduce all my students to them." And I just went, "Yes, we're getting somewhere." So
I love that. And
yeah,
so the first two are out now, and then
right.
there are two more coming out, right?
There's they're going to come out every 6 months now for the next 2 years. So there'll be one in early winter and then one in August again, early winter again, and August again. And if they do well, we might do 20 of these. And if they don't,
Can,
they don't. You never know.
well, can I Can I just tell you that here's what I love, because especially having been an avid reader as a kid growing up, and I still love to read, is when you find a good series and then you have to wait and wait
Yeah,
and wait
yeah.
and wait for the next book. I love that they're coming out two at a time.
Yes. And the fact that they'll be coming out two at a time now, and then one. We knew if we waited a year, they're a grade older at that point. So we just want
Yeah.
them to keep reading. So like a Christmas book, then a summer book, then a Christmas book, summer book. So we'll see how all that works out. Fingers crossed.
Well, I love it so much. Stay with us, Ridley, because we are going to keep the conversation going right after this quick break.
I'm gonna go stir my casserole.
Okay, go stir your casserole real quick. And continue our conversation with New York Times bestselling author Ridley Pearson, as we just talked about his latest book series that just hit bookshelves, Magical Map. The first two books are out right now. They're for grades 2 to 5. So with kids going back to school, you might want to grab those for your kiddos and get them reading early this school year. However, another one of Ridley's acclaimed books, Peter and the Starcatchers, was adapted into a Broadway play. In fact, it has won quite a few Tony Awards. And guess what? That play is going to the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. And so, Ridley, I wanted to talk a little bit more about this because, first
I'm
off, the
80.
fact that it's okay, I love this so much. So, we had Dave Barry on the show, and he co-wrote Peter and the Starcatchers with you. So, first off, tell us a little bit about Peter and the Starcatchers for folks who may not be familiar.
Sure. So it goes back to what we were talking about in the last segment, that you've got to keep your kids reading. And so we read to our kids. We have two daughters, and we read to them every night for an hour, hour and a half, every darn day of their lives. In fact, they were still coming back at 13 after they'd stopped doing this and said, "Can we have another reading night?" And we would, even at that
Oh,
age. But at the time, our eldest, Paige, was anxious to read something, and she pulled out the novella of Peter Pan. And we went out into the hallway and sat on a chair. I can remember right where I was, and we started reading it. And she's kind of precocious. And 5 pages in, she put her hand across the words and said, "Dad, how did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place?" And
oh my
I'm a writer,
gosh.
so I have a little light that attaches to the top of my cranium, and my light went off. And I thought, "Oh my gosh." And I said to her, "Sweetie, that's a story." And then I went, "No, no, no, that's not a story. That's a book, and Daddy's going to write the book." And I dumped her into the chair and ran to my office and started making notes, because I could just see this prequel. How did a boy become Peter Pan? And
Yeah.
there's Tinker Bell, there's flying, there's never growing old, there's just there's Captain Hook and mermaids, and this whole canvas expanded in front of my eyes. And I've been playing in a rock and roll band for over 30 years now, and it's all best-selling authors, among them Stephen
Hmm.
King and Amy Tan and Dave Barry. And I was down playing a show in Miami, and I was staying with Dave Barry, and he asked me what I was up to, and I mentioned Paige's question. And we never really talked business in this band, but he looked up and said, "You know, the two of us could write this." And I said, "I could write the suspense, and you could write the humor." And he said, "Exactly."
Oh,
So we decided to co-write this, having no idea how one did such a thing. And for the next 10 years, we collaborated on 12 books, the first
oh
of
my
which was Peter
gosh.
and the Starcatcher. And it was an amazing experience to work with that crazy maniac, who's just, so bright and so fun to work with. And we really thought, we talked through the whole thing, and we said, let's just do an 80-page book that we can go down to Kinko's and print this thing up, and I'll get two copies for Page and Story, and you can get a copy for Sophie, and we'll be done. And it's one of these projects that was just born out of having a good time. And somewhere in there, while I was working on the Kingdom Keepers, I mentioned to my editor that I was writing a prequel to Peter Pan with Dave Barry, and there was just this dead silence on the other end of the phone. And my editor at the time, Wendy Lefkon, said, "Can you say that again?"
Ah,
And I repeated it, and she said, "Do you know that we own Peter Pan?" And I said, "Well,
no.
I'm not going to publish this. Don't worry about it." And she said, "No, you're not. We are. Send me what you've got." So we sent her 3 chapters and she bought it on the spot. And our 80 pages turned into 550.
Well, I have to tell you, first off, I remember the day that I gave my oldest son Peter and the Starcatchers.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
it was one of the first times he actually sat down and read a book from cover to cover without me having to bug him to do it. And he just turned 17 and he still talks about reading that book, Ridley. I mean, I think it's impactful for, for those middle school readers and everything. But with that said, so here you write this book just out of fun, it gets published, and then it gets adapted to a play. So tell us
And
how that
this
all
is the
happened.
crazy part of being an author. So here's not an unusual story. It gets optioned to Disney as a possible animated feature.
Hmm.
And right then, Disney acquires, Lasseter's company, Pixar. And
Okay.
Lasseter says, "Hey, I like the project, but it will take 6 years to do, and we won't start it for about 7 years." And
Oh
Dave
my
and I said,
goodness.
"We might not be alive in 7 years." So we moved on to animated, and it was optioned as a live action movie, and it was going to be directed by one of the guys who did um, a piece of Hunger Games. I mean, an
Hmm.
amazing director. And his proposal takes 18 months for him just to get his proposal in shape, at which point Warner Brothers announces that Pan with Hugh Jackman is coming out and
Oh,
Disney
right.
dumps that project. So now we're like 3 years into this thing. And then we get a call from Disney Theatrical saying, "Hey, Peter Pan started as a play and we'd like to make it a play." And we said, "Go
Oh,
for
that's
it."
right.
And so then it took 6 years to turn a book into a play. And I had this amazing opportunity of keeping my mouth shut and just watching it be developed year after year after year. And it finally went to La Jolla, California, the La Jolla Playhouse, where it ran in workshop, which means the audience stays after the performance and makes comments. And Disney felt it was good enough to move on to off Broadway. And we went to the New York Theater Workshop, and it had one of the best runs of any play ever workshopped at the New York Theater Workshop. And then they moved it to Broadway, and it won 5 Tonys. And it is still being performed in 700 productions a year across the United States. So thousands of people seeing it, including Boise this September.
Yes. I mean, so is it almost surreal
It's
to,
very
I mean,
surreal.
it's got to be, right? Because I
It's
mean,
very surreal.
it's not just someone, picking up your book and reading it. Now it's sitting there and watching someone saying the words that you created. And,
And
and,
listening to
and
Rick Ellis's incredible version of it, which is so funny. And it's funny at an adult level and at a kid level. So a lot of it goes over the kids' heads, and the adults are chuckling, and then the adults are kind of rolling their eyes, and the kids are chuckling. And he tells a story so similar to the book, but it's not the book, of course, it's a play. And it's just ingenious. He did such a brilliant job.
And can you talk a little bit more about the impact on adults? Because I think that sometimes what happens with books like this, and then they get adapted into plays, and everybody assumes like, oh, so it's a play that I'm just supposed to take my kids to, and it's
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. This is for adults too.
Yeah, it's totally for adults. Um, no, that's one of the great misconceptions. In fact, there was just a huge production of it in Australia, and the media picked up on the kid side of it. And it's really a play for adults. And so I think in many ways, the wrong audience came in Australia. And it was a terrific adaptation, a terrific performance by everybody, but it moves very quickly. It's brilliantly acted. There's about, I'd say there's between 12 and 14 actors who play 50 roles. So they're
Oh my
always switching
gosh.
costumes, switching hats. They move. We don't have a crew that moves the props. They move all the props. So the story just rips. And there's, I don't know, 5 to 7 songs in it. It's not a musical, but there are these sea chanties and things in it. And you just get this amazing experience. I think that's why it's been going for 12 years now, all over the country in schools, is that and community theater, is that it's just a really fun evening. It compels you. There's mystery. There's action. There's a wonderful sort of heartfelt love story between these children. It's just, if Dave and I had written this, Gemma, it would it wouldn't have made it to a middle school in Padoki. But with Rick Ellis behind the pen, it really comes to life.
Well, Ridley, it is always such a delight to talk with you. We have been talking about Ridley's newest series, Magical Map. The first 2 books are out right now. Go grab them for your kiddos. Ridley, thank you so much for taking time for us.
Thank you so much. Idaho Matters, and we're all going to support you.
That was my interview with best-selling author Ridley Pearson, talking about his new chapter book series, Magical Map. It's set at Disney World's Pirates of the Caribbean ride. The Idaho Shakespeare Festival is wrapping up its season by bringing to life Peter and the Starcatcher. It's a whimsical, fast-paced adventure that imagines how Peter Pan became the boy who never grew up. Now, this play, it is filled with humor and heart and really some unexpected twists. And today, we are lucky enough to have the play's director, Jackie Miller, and actors Joe Wagner and Angela Utera, who bring these beloved characters to the stage, joining us now to talk more about the play. I want to welcome all 3 of you to the show.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks for having us.
Jackie, let me start with you. For folks who may not be familiar, how would you describe what Peter and the Starcatcher is all about?
Well, I think it's got a tag that comes with it, and it's called the playful prequel to Peter Pan. And I think it really captures the spirit of the show and essentially the journey that you're on.
And Jackie, as I mentioned, I mean, the play really imagines the origins of Peter Pan. So I'm curious about what you think makes the story, so compelling for audiences.
I think it's a coming of age story. I think it's about finding friendship and love and your identity. And I think it balances that along with life's beauty, there's true hardship in growing up, and that both things are equal, the beauty and the loss. So I think there's a lot to the story, and one of the things I'm most drawn to is the relationship between Molly Astor and boy Peter Pan, and just this, these 2 young humans who find each other, who don't really have any friends. Like there's just this automatic click. There is something about them that they find their person in the world who helps them transform, at this pivotal moment in each of their lives. And to me, that is one of the most moving things about the show.
So, Joe, let me bring you into the conversation. You play Black Stash. Now, this is really Captain Hook before he was Hook. So there's also this, we get to find out about Captain Hook as well. Mm-hmm. What's it like to play such a larger-than-life character?
I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a dream come true, because my whole childhood, growing up watching Disney movies, every single time my favorite character was the funny villain, and this show gives me the chance to play exactly that. And there's a lot of really, really good humor, and there's really awesome things that I get to dive into with this character, and he's complex, but also it's a really good time playing Captain Hook.
It's interesting too, because the play overall never uses a lot of props. I mean, you really have to kind of imagine, right? And so Joe or Angela, I'm curious about how that challenges you as actors.
It is challenging, but it's also a really fun challenge to work with an ensemble cast, and everybody's kind of got each other's backs, and we really have to work as a team to collaborate and make these things happen and come true. And we ask the audience to, meet us more than halfway with their imaginations, but it's amazing what we can do. And Jackie had some really awesome things to like using ropes and different planks and boards to create different environments and different props. And it's a really fun, it makes for a really fun night at the theater to really, use your imagination. And
Yeah.
it's great being in an ensemble cast to make that happen.
Yeah, it asks you to be a child again and to like play pretend a little bit. So
I kind of love that. And Jackie, the play is written to be really witty and fast paced. I mean, and there are jokes that, of course, land with kids, but they land with adults. And I think sometimes when we think about Peter Pan, there's this assumption that, oh, well, then it's a play just for kids, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you, right? So how do you approach keeping different audiences engaged, but also having adults recognize that this is not a play just for kids?
Yeah, I think because of that tag that I was speaking about earlier, right? The playful prequel to Peter Pan. You're exactly right, Gemma. Like, I think people assume that this is a kids' show, and it's absolutely not. I think there is what I find so unique and beautiful about this show is it really does span like every age range. And what's been beautiful is we've been in, this is our third location that we've done this production at now. And every time we have kids that are laughing at different things that are completely different from the adults. But I would say across the board, everybody is having an equally wonderful time. I've heard a couple of times, and I don't know how this lands on people, but they kind of liken it to SpongeBob, where it's like there's jokes and humor that totally land on the kids, but the pun, the language, the text is very elevated, and it's really, really humorous for adults as well. I don't know. I have to say, I have to credit, the book writer Rick Ellis with that because it is an incredibly witty show, but to me, it is as moving as it is witty. And I truly, like 100% believe that this is one of few shows that is absolutely for all ages.
Before I let you go, Joe and Angela, what are you hoping that audiences walk away feeling after they see this play?
I hope that they are left feeling the same way that I honestly feel every day after we do the play. And the first time I read the play, I remember being absolutely, I don't want them to feel devastated, but I was going to use the word devastated. I hope that they feel a sense of catharsis because I think the play moves so fast, so much happens, and at the end you're kind of left with a bit of a release and acceptance about growing up and growing up every day as an adult and also growing up every day as a kid and how we never really stop doing that. So I hope that people are able to become children again and feeling a little bit more playful and reminiscent about their own childhood and their own who they hoped they would be when they were an adult and who they are now. I hope that there's some reflection, I guess.
Just backing up that, I think that there's an opportunity for folks to kind of escape into a different world. And I don't, it's a it why I love coming to the theater and being a storyteller is because it allows people to dive into like different perspectives and different worlds. And coming and seeing this show, I mean, it's such a funny show and there's so much heart that you're gonna laugh, you're gonna cry, you're gonna get everywhere in between all those emotions. And hopefully the show ends and you go, oh wow, I was able to breathe or let something out for, a couple of hours and had a really good time. And my face hurts from smiling and laughing so much. So I hope that their face hurts, I guess.
Well, I want to thank all three of you so much for taking time to talk with us. We've been talking with Peter and the Starcatcher director Jackie Miller and actors Joe Wagner and Angela Utera. They are currently performing Peter and the Starcatcher at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. It goes through September 28th, and there are still tickets available. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudette.